Hello, everyone. Welcome to DADennial. Today's guest is someone who's changing the conversation around men's mental health quietly, powerfully, and unapologetically. Dr. Jett Stone is a licensed clinical psychologist, a writer, a speaker, and the author of the book Quiet Your Mind, a men's guide, a science-backed real-world playbook for men dealing with stress, overthinking, and emotional burnout. He's also been featured in Psychology Today, the New York Times, CNN, and even led workshops for leaders and high performers through his consulting work at Workhaven. What really sets Jett apart is his ability to name the invisible load that so many dads carry, without judgment or without shame. Whether you're juggling work, fatherhood, or the inner critic in your own head, this conversation hopefully is going to be for you. So please welcome Dr. Jett Stone. How are you doing today, Jett?
Doing great. It's really great to be on here. Thank you for that intro.
You can thank ChatGPT. I saw a few things there, and
I appreciate the honesty of that.
That thing is just really, yeah. When I saw it quietly, powerfully, and unapologetically, I'm like, I have to leave that in there. I can't think of three powerful words like that all in one sentence, but I feel like they work well. I guess my first question is, I was curious of what led you do journalism and clinical psychology. So how did you kind of get into one or the other? How did you get into doing all this writing aspect of it too, on top of your practice there?
So I began college as an English major and just reading a lot, doing a lot of essay writing, and just noticing the way that some of the greatest authors were the greatest psychologists.
Yeah.
And once I graduated college, I wanted to do something in the writing world. I ended up in journalism school. And I did a lot of writing and reporting in New York City, and started to take a bent, more of a psychological bent on the way that I saw the world through that. I ended up working at Psychology Today on the editorial side of things. And that led me to interview psychologists, psychotherapists, great thinkers, and it led me to think, I'd really love to go into psychology. And I chose clinical psychology, which is applying psychology to the real world, sometimes with people who have severe mental health difficulties. And so once I graduated college, I was in journalism school reporting, and eventually got into a PhD program where I began to train as a psychologist. And, when it comes to the writing part, I sort of knew I could always come back to being a writer, and that it would take a lot more like academic groundwork and training to be a clinical psychologist. So, in the last 10 years, I've been focusing more on writing about psychology, specifically men's mental health issues.
That's great. I feel like I'm doing the opposite of, I've been doing psychology for 15 years now. I'm trying to get more into the writing space. You were talking about all the different psychologists and the people that you got to interview. Was there one that stood out that you're like, wow, this is someone I really, personally relate to, or something that you really adapted your writing to, or what you felt?
I'll give you one, and it's Ellen Langer. She's a psychologist at Harvard, and I got a chance to get her on the phone and talk to her about mindfulness. She is one of the pioneers when it comes to researching that, and I think it was just so inspiring to hear her talk for an article that one of the editors was writing. And then it was just conversations with family friends who were therapists, the way that they saw the world, and the way that they understood it just felt at home for me, and I was just inspired by it. And I wish I'd found it earlier, but I found it a little bit later in my 20s.
Still ahead of me. It was in my 30s. I know who you're talking about, Ellen Langer. I was lucky enough to do a class with John Kabat-Zinn in mindfulness. And when I lived up in the Boston area in the Center for Mindfulness out in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, it's just a full center. That's where they do all their training out there. And that was a great experience when I kind of got into that. And yeah, I can understand of that transformation of yourself, of how you look at things, how you see things, how you even see just mindful walking right in front of you. It's just mind-blowing. It really is. If anyone out there to take a chance of looking at mindfulness-based stress reduction, that's something I always preach and practice myself. Yes, that's great.
It is powerful. And over the course of time, I found myself like I could belong in this space as a therapist. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but there weren't a lot of male models of being a therapist that I could look to. And so, when I finally found some and talked to family friends who did that, it became much more of a possibility.
That's great. It sounds like this was part of your inspiration, but what made you focus in on men's mental health specifically?
Well, I did my training at the Manhattan VA. And so whenever you work in a VA system, you are, disproportionately going to see men. And so what ended up happening was that I started to work with PTSD and moral injury, and I got to see a large caseload of men for whom psychotherapy, they oftentimes would go into it reluctantly with a lot of mistrust. And so I, learned the ropes of psychotherapy, working with some men who had seen some terrible things in their lives and had gone through so many hardships. And it made me think about therapy through a gendered lens of masculinity. And I looked around, and there wasn't really like a lot of training or clinical focus on how to work with men through a gendered lens. Feminism did such a great thing in terms of helping clinicians understand human psychology through that particular filter. And I became interested in just the male mind and how we think, behave, and feel differently, partly because of biology, but largely because of socialization and the way that we're raised.
Do you find, and kind of follow up as I'm thinking about this too, of the DADennial model that I'm created came out of being a stay-at-home dad and having that lens of seeing it from being a stay-at-home dad, but also seeing it as a therapist and knowing men's struggles of how do you adapt to what the world is now compared to our fathers, right? Of all the different struggles and being a parent and being a husband and trying to fulfill all these roles is a huge challenge. And I think what you're talking about is, how they had feminism, but there is no name for it. There is no template. There is no guide for,
we're literally figuring it out right now in the real time.
We're literally
right
figuring it out, yes.
Like through these podcasts, through conversations, through the think pieces that are being written, like this is the experimental phase, I think. And figuring out how to do this, the simpler blueprint for masculinity or fatherhood, in the case of this podcast, has been torn up. And I don't know if there's anything that's totally legible that has replaced it. So we're in this state of ambiguity, and I think we should just embrace it. And you've got to work through the kinks, work through the, figure out how to talk about it in a way that meets our actual experience. So that's my framing on it. And that's why I love, talking publicly about it.
Do you find in your practice and in your writing that, especially with men, that the psychology kind of the CBT models, cognitive behavioral therapy, or do you find it more geared towards, there's supposed to be a generalized model, right? Of like, it's supposed to be for men, women, not race, not color, but I find it, there is those divisions of not just race, not just color, but just, men and women, just of like the men that I see in my practice. I feel like there's that common theme of always, I've tried this before and it hasn't worked. And it's been with, I've tried different female therapists, but trying to find a male therapist is hard enough. And then if I found you, I'm like, oh, okay, here's someone that's more relatable. But even I find of those standard contexts of psychology and those, models of cognitive behavioral therapy, as I'll use as the common example, just don't fit. You can kind of have to mold it and model it differently for men, I find personally.
I think I agree with that. Just as I guess you call it a plug, a colleague of mine in the UK, Chris Hemmings, we're starting what's called the Men's Therapy Hub. It's launched in the UK, so just menstherapyhub.co.uk for now. We're going to get the US one out soon, but it's a directory of male therapists. So I'll talk to you, Mike, about this maybe offline. And it's also a home base for supervision, maybe for mentorship of younger guys who want to go into psychotherapy and don't necessarily see a path ahead for that. So we're trying to, bring this out more into the open and have these conversations about men and therapy and male therapists. But back to your point about CBT versus other other therapy modalities, I tend less to think that men are better suited in CBT, which is more structured than, say, a psychodynamic type of therapy. I actually don't agree with that. I think of it through the lens of the process of therapy rather than the brand of therapy. And that one of the things that I'm focusing on in the workshops that I'm doing is building a therapeutic alliance with men, more so than just about like what modality works. I think any modality, could potentially work with men. When we think about men like who are more on like the traditional masculine spectrum, that you really do have to focus on how to make therapy less alienating. And my practice is full, maybe similar to yours, of guys who historically would never have gone into psychotherapy. Or people who've had previous bad experiences and pleasant experiences in therapy and are trying it again for a second time. And so I think we have to think a lot about those beginning stages and selling therapy in a way that meets them where they are in their life and talking to them. So it's, at the lens of language, through the lens of setting goals. It might be more structured in the beginning. You might have to sort of give them an idea of what this process is going to look like. But that doesn't mean it's always going to stay structured. I think you really have to go into therapy with men, lifting the hood on the process.
Right.
And making it a relatable thing, even if it means walk and talk. I'm open to that, different formats of it as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sometimes that structured is good for certain people, but I think the word that always comes to mind for me is awareness. I'm just learning that self-awareness, I think, is one of the biggest things that working with men of, like, they see there's a problem, but they don't know what it is, and they don't know where to start. And it is just kind of like making them aware of that, repeating the cycle, like, hey, how did you grow up? What happened to you? Just trying to understand because I think for men, and I don't have the clinical background, but just of my experience of, right, you just kind of know, you're just kind of going, right? You're just kind of doing life. Like, I'm supposed to get a job, I'm supposed to have a family, I'm supposed to have a house. This is what I'm supposed to do. And when you slow down and stop, which you're not really trained and ever thought to, even myself, until my 30s, and then but touched on the other piece too that is very prominent in what I do and what I'm trying to put out there of, right, when I went back to grad school, it was 18 women and me. It's pretty much, it's like one or two guys every training I go to. It's just majority of women. It's geared towards that. I don't know if what you've read. I always looked into it and wondered myself, like, what happened? Like, where are those all those men that were writing and were doing all this kind of psychological work in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? And I guess the conclusion I came to, I don't know what you've seen or seen into, but the HMO policy, right, of like the money wise, and that was one of the things that someone wrote about. Of it wasn't men were then kind of pushed towards like become an engineer, go into STEM fields, not to go in those social aspect kind of fields like psychology or sociology. And I think that's right. It is that big hurdle of when you talk to young men, as I've had 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, of looking at like, what do I want to do? I was here supposed to be this field or that field, and like, what about psychology? Or they'll ask me about psychology, and I'm like, like, how do you even get into that? And it's just like not brought up to them, even in school, even in counselors. So I think that's sounds like the men's therapy hub is definitely would be a great start. That's awesome that they're doing that in the UK, and hearing that you're going to bring it over here. That's definitely something we'll plug.
We're definitely working on it, and I think your experience, it speaks to me as well. If you can't see it, it's hard to be it, and right. So, there's a number of different reasons why there are fewer male therapists, and especially under the age of 30, like in training to be therapists, there's,
Yeah.
ranges from 5% to 25%. It depends on the, social worker versus psychologist. But yeah, money is one of the reasons why it doesn't, to a lot of men, it doesn't seem like a viable career. And
Right.
so that's understandable, and there's some thinking that, that it's become a quote unquote feminized profession. And what that means is that if you just see women in all the trainings or women in all of your classes, or that, the idea of a therapist is sort of female coded, then it's like, okay, well, do I belong here? Like, is this a place for me? Will I be accepted in this profession? And it's like, it takes some courage to say, okay, I'm going to be the one guy in this class of 16.
You're absolutely right. It does take a little courage. It takes a little, which is adaptation of, this is different. And I don't think they gave you the full picture either of, yes, you have to kind of go through the training, not just of school, but of your practicum, internship, and post follow-up, 2,000 hours to get your license. And the pay isn't great, but there is the opportunity, right? They don't tell you, but you can find your niche, you can find what you're good at, and you can create your own entity and, work off of that to create what you want and hopefully make as much as you want. And there's opportunities out there, but I don't think that's told, unfortunately.
It isn't. Yeah. And people like you and me, like, I'm similar in the sense that for the longest time, I didn't feel like I had access, at least verbally, in an expressive way, to my inner world. And over the course of my own therapy, over the course of my own studying and doing psychotherapy for a while, it's like so liberating to have that language, to unblock what you're feeling inside from its expression, that, I want to share that with other men. I think going from the process of not having that to, I'd like to think, having that,
Right.
it's important to have male therapists out there who fundamentally in their bones get that, because then it changes the language of how you speak to someone about it too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was going to mention about your book, Quiet Your Mind. I think one thing I kind of wrote down here, you say overthinking is the mental health issue men don't talk about. Why do you feel, what's your thoughts behind that?
So overthinking is a great entry point into talking about mental health in general, but men's mental health. It's a term that's widely used colloquially, like, oh, I overthought that. Or you can overthink your tennis serve, right? Or you can overthink which, jacket to buy on Amazon. But you can also overthink terrible things that have happened in your life. So it really runs the spectrum. And because it's such a versatile word and an approachable word, it was one that I wanted to focus on in this book, and one that my publisher requested that I focus on. And so there's the term that we use, overthinking, but then there's like the way that academic psychologists study it too, which is called repetitive negative thinking, which is some combination of worry and rumination, which I can define or talk about if you want to. But repetitive negative thinking, or overthinking, shows up across different mental health conditions. It's called transdiagnostic. That's the fancy term for it, which means that if you're looking at trauma, if you're looking at substance use, if you're looking at eating disorders, anxiety, depression, overthinking is there. So as a therapist yourself, like, you work with overthinking. You may not call it that. I certainly do. You don't get to escape the overthinking of someone, in our profession, because it's going to show up. Most of us as humans overthink. And I could define it a little bit more if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
I like to think of it as thinking that's overstayed its welcome and outlived its usefulness to you. It's like language on overdrive in a way. And so there's the worry component of overthinking, where you're looking at the uncertain future. Think of the question, what if I get this presentation wrong? What if I do poorly on this podcast? What if? There's a sense like I can control this if I think enough. This is a possibly controllable event. If I just simulate out different, possibilities, I can avoid danger or avoid some feared outcome. That's the worry
Right.
piece, and it tends to be more like a chain of thoughts. And then you have the rumination piece of the overthinking puzzle, and it's more of a fixation on the past. And it's like you're fixating on like failures and how sad you are and past relationships, and you're digging for insight. It's almost, it's like, I know I can't control anything, but I want to know why. And so if worry's what if, rumination is like the question, why is this so bad? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And so, there's overlap. So if you're overthinking, you might be kind of time traveling a little bit to the future, to the past, which is why a mindfulness-based approach to things, being as present oriented as you possibly can, is a wonderful target for overthinking.
Yeah, definitely.
With the rumination, do you see that a lot with men our age, that dad age group, where they're thinking back in the past, ruminating how things could have been different if I just made a left instead of a right? That's probably like the big thing, right, for our age group?
It is, and I'm part of that age group. As a dad, your responsibilities just kick up like another notch, and it's so full of meaning and fulfillment being a father, but so much full of like being accountable,
Right.
as a person is. And so you do see that that there's more. If there was financial anxiety before in your past as a dad, that's going to be kicked up, and you see that a lot with men. Economic anxiety is one of the, is a hotbed of overthinking. And, you start to model out things in the future. How can I keep this together? That's the kind of overthinking that happens with a lot of men. It's like, how can I make this all work for my family? Are my kids going to be okay? Are we safe? Are we financially secure? Are we physically secure? It's like a different type of burden that may not show up as much in a mom. And so I do work with that. And, what you were talking about, Caesar, is like, you could time travel forward with how can I make this all work? And then you could time travel backward. What could I have done differently in the past? Or if you're not in a great relationship, maybe you're ruminating on a previous relationship that could have, would have been.
Yeah.
And it's intense for a lot of men. I sometimes like to think of them as inner battles, because a lot of times with guys, they're externalized. So we don't necessarily see the interior. You end up seeing them drinking too much, or you end up seeing a guy driving too fast, or being irritable or angry, or sometimes overeating, or like whatever. It's externalized in men. And so that's one of the reasons why I do like to talk about it, because I want to open the curtain on what's going on in the interior, that there is anxiety and sometimes depression too.
Do you find kind of what you're talking about, maybe it was something I was saying earlier too, of it's that learned behavior, right? That economic worry of, and even for myself personally, I can speak of, okay, my wife is the one that, she's the accountant that, made a different career choice, and she's able to make more, and I can kind of work at nights and do different things. I can be more mobile, but I'm not going to make as much. And that even in of itself is wait a minute, why do I feel different about that? Because I've been told for so long of like, you're the guy, you're the provider. Yep. I think that it's something that comes up so often in so many sessions of, normalizing that aspect of, it's okay if she makes more, I'm providing this to her, I'm able to pick up the kids, I'm able to do this, and trying to normalize it and make it seem okay. And I think it's two sides too. Sometimes it's the husband, but it also can be the wife or the partner of, accepting that role of not being upset of because they're, sometimes told of, right, the other side of it of, well, why am I working so hard? I should be home with the kids, or I want to spend more time with the kids and have a balance. I think it's very convoluted sometimes. And I think something else you were saying there, when I was hearing, about negative feedback loop is the term I hear, right? When we're talking about the ruminating and just kind of sitting there like, right, that spiral, like cognitive behavioral therapy of how do you get out of that? And it's so hard once it starts, right? And that's one of the hardest pieces I find. I don't know if you find it too, of working with men and dads and men in their 30s, 40s, and beyond. Of you got to try to learn how to stop it before it even starts, because when it starts, then it goes of, well, not just the 40s. Now we go back to the 30s. Now we go back to the 20s of that left versus right, and different decisions that you make, and
Certainly.
One of the mantras I always kind of use, even for myself, is control what you can control, because there's so many things that you can't, and trying to find those pieces and parts of life where hopefully you can feel like there's some sense of, I got this, I can do this, I can manage this. And I think that's sometimes the hardest piece, especially for men and dads and these new type of roles that we're in, right? I think that we want to be more present at home and with our kids, but how do we achieve that? I think your book helps a lot with just kind of laying it out there, just kind of helping men just have that discussion, right? Just that, I guess, the first place to start. Do you have advice that you'd give to dads trying to balance the ambition with being like emotionally present?
Sure. And I think the book, I wanted to make overthinking more manageable for men. We can't stop. I think the agenda to try to stop your mind from thinking is going to be a failed agenda, because that's what minds do. We're language generating creatures. We have thousands and thousands of thoughts every single day. But just back to the earlier point, like, I think sometimes men do fixate on the economic or the money piece of being a provider. And what you were touching upon there is that that's not necessarily how, a good female partner would see providing. When I say a good one who loves you wholly and fully beyond your ability to, make money. The providing is like, are you, not necessarily do you make a lot of money, but like, are you reliable? Do you show up when you're needed? Is your presence there? Is your caring and loving presence in the room? Can I trust you to be somewhere? Can I trust you to maybe have to pull back from your work to give me a chance? All that's within the providing camp. It's not just money. And I think sometimes as guys, we fail to see that. We think, oh God, I got to make more money to make this all work. It's all about what I do. A lot of young guys get asked that when they're dating. What do you do? Not who you are. And so there's this pressure. It's not easy. It's much easier said than done. And so providing is much bigger than bringing home a cash load. So I just want to speak to that one aspect of it. I could pause there and then talk more about like managing overthinking. But
you're saying even like the younger guys, but even what I experience now, and I tell my wife of like it is still hard, because now of like, what do you do? Well, I could say I am a therapist, licensed clinical counselor, but like that's not my full time. I'm more of a dad, and I catch myself like, why don't I just say if like I'm a stay-at-home dad? I take care of the kids, I pick them up, do what I need to do, plan vacations, plan trips with them, do things with them, and that should be okay. But it's still that learned behavior, that kind of piece of society as a whole. I feel like it just popped to mind as we're talking of, because I always feel like the money piece is something that's tangible, right? Something you can see, you can feel, you can touch. And when you don't have that piece, when it was just even this past Mother's Day of this little trip that we had and planned, and I set it up at this little orchard and blah, blah, blah. And we went out there, and the woman that checked us in and brought us to her table was like, talking to my wife of, that's really nice that you probably had to plan this yourself, kind of thing. And she's like, no, my husband does it, right? Like something that's not tangible, something that's not seen, that's not like, but I took time to plan this, to set this up, to make this for her, and just that making her stop. Like, oh, that's the first time I've heard today that a man, her husband, planned this for mom for Mother's Day. Like, yeah, that's this cultural societal piece too, right? It's both sides, that's male and female, that I think is still needing to kind of grow and learn. I think that's where we're kind of stuck sometimes. It's both sides of the coin, right? Guys need to adapt and change, but I think maybe what you were touching on earlier, the feminism piece of, that changed society as a whole, of how guys saw and perceived women's role in the workforce and in society, and what their importance in the world and just in our country. And I think going forward, right, for men to kind of have that same opportunity of, I went grocery shopping, I did all the small stuff, but you can't see, it's not necessarily tangible,
Right.
in everyday life, but is important nonetheless. And that providing piece, as we're talking about, for sure.
I think it's a great example.
So you had mentioned something about it having like a good woman, part of that toxic masculinity that keeps on rearing its ugly head. It doesn't just come from men, it also comes from women and their own expectations. Have you noticed that as well, with that expectation of the tangible dollars in your pocket, or being that male provider? It's not just on the men's side, but also from possible partners that they may have.
Yeah, and when I use that term, good woman, I really meant someone who is looking for a three-dimensional man, not looking, for money, or just like you wouldn't want a man who's chasing after a woman solely for their looks. It puts someone in a very one-dimensional or two-dimensional space to do that. Just to clarify what I meant there. And I think the toxic masculinity language is just toxic. It doesn't help, especially as a therapist. Mike, I'm sure you can agree. There hasn't been a time in a therapy session where I've been like, let's talk about your toxic masculinity. So I think toxic masculinity, the language, is a problem. It makes it seem as if there's something inherently toxic or wrong about masculinity. And so when that phrase is used by anyone, not just women, but anyone, it makes it seem like masculinity itself is good or bad. It's not. Masculinity is just neutral. It's a bunch of traits and attributes. It's all about the context. Sometimes being aggressive is necessary. Sometimes being, very pragmatic and logical is necessary. And sometimes it's destructive. Absolutely. And so I think as a therapist, especially, we have to think about toxic masculinity paints a bad picture of masculinity, and by association men, and that what language matters. And so you're right. Caesar. It's not helping the issues facing men by throwing around terms like that. It's counterproductive.
Do you find now that, talking about toxic masculinity, I feel like that was the term for the last, handful of years, that now it's kind of morphed into the Manosphere? I feel like I've been hearing more of that in the last few years, of that overall cultural shift of, and I always try to think of it myself, of not necessarily what happened, but of how did it kind of grow or metastasize into this place of it's not just toxic masculinity of the words. Now it's this whole cultural shift of, and I kind of wonder too if it kind of goes into of that, not say being afraid of therapy, but just kind of therapies are in this box over here, and the Manosphere, and this is over in this box over here, and we're actually getting further away from finding that ability to kind of work through. I always kind of go back to we were making forward progress through the Me Too movement, and then all of a sudden it kind of stopped, and now it's reverting back the other way, almost of and how do you kind of bring it back? Sometimes I've been thinking about this and trying to wonder of how does it go from here? It was, I think it went from toxic masculinity into the Manosphere, and curious of what your thoughts are of or what you've seen of a possible shift, or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, when you talk about the Manosphere, I tend to think of younger men, whereas before maybe dads, we're talking about it, and I think dads are on the Manosphere as well, which is just online communities that are talking about a whole range of different things, from cars to weightlifting to finance, and then dropped in there from time to time are just really ugly messages about what it means to be a man, accumulate women, take advantage of women, or unhealthy muscle building practices or supplements that are sketchy. And so Manosphere is this just big, is a morass of communities that younger men tend to look to. And so as opposed to going to therapy, or as opposed to sort of working through their problems in a healthy way, they'll turn to these online communities called the Manosphere as a way to understand themselves too. It's like, that's their go-to. It's literally right at their fingertips. And I think some of these figures that have come out of there have seized upon that desire.
Right.
You know, in a sometimes in a really problematic way. What makes this tricky is that they get a lot of probably good information in the Manosphere. I don't know what percentage of it is,
Right.
but you know, it's not all this dark alley that they're walking down. A lot of it is some positive, empowering material. And so from the Manosphere, they can find they can be a man and be proud of it and be okay with it. And that's what they're looking for. There's the yearning.
Yeah. A belonging, right?
Yeah.
Search for, and that's a big thing for men and just cultural overall, right? Where do you belong? Where do you fit in? And I think for younger, you're right, it is tilted more younger, but you know, even the older and I think this is where an opportunity is for someone like yourself or even myself of what we were talking about earlier of having so few male therapists to kind of push back. And I almost feel like it kind of sounds cliche to say, but it's like an alternative therapist, right? Of like, no, like, you know, there is that piece of it of like, I don't completely agree with everything that comes out of the therapy world. And, you know, I want to try to help and try to be a voice of change and progress, but also of, you know, countering back of some of the stuff that is negative and it is on the podcast and on the internet that we see that younger people are more influenced by. And that's, I guess my concern is more of, I don't know what your concern, but with the younger male generation of, right, it's when they kind of get this information in their late teens and 20s of like that is setting them up for what they're going to be like going forward, right? It's like this, you're very impressionable and able to kind of change and kind of understand and figure out who you are and where you fit in, and you know that's very impressionable time. And that's my biggest concern, I guess, of that Manosphere and where the language and where the stuff is going and where there isn't enough male presence to kind of have a counter voice. I don't know if you see that too.
A counter voice, but also add nuance to these discussions, as we're trying to do here. You know, when we talk about men and masculinity, that like when you rely on a buzzword like toxic masculinity or, you know, even Manosphere, it starts to lose its complexity. Mm-hmm. And so having a male therapist, you can inhabit the complexity of this stuff in a one-on-one or sometimes even a group setting. And it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about. And so you got to give them that space and the grace to sort it through. And I think the media or some of the national conversations around men and masculinity lose that nuance.
How do you feel about men that feel like therapy isn't for them? I'm sure you probably heard that term, like, it isn't for me.
Yeah, I take them at their word. You know, it may not be for them, but if they're not doing well and they've exhausted all the other options,
mm-hmm.
then it's worth giving it a shot. I think a lot of times when people say that, I guess I don't really take them at their word then. I guess I kind of think that maybe it's a provocative thing to say.
Yeah.
It might be an indirect way of saying, I'm hurting and I've tried a lot of different things and I don't trust that sitting down across from somebody is going to help me. I don't see the ROI on sitting across from another person and hashing things out and paying money for it. I think also when I hear that, I'm like, oh man, I wish that person would have a high quality therapeutic experience. My goal is, my idealistic aim is to make therapy approachable and less alienating. So it feels like it is a front line of care for a guy who's hurting. Yeah. So it does make me feel sad. And I also think partly the therapy space is changing a lot with coaching, and therapy influencers. It's confusing out there. Like, what exactly is there? What is therapy anymore? Because the language of therapy is all over the place. Saying the buzzwords and therapy speak. That I think there's also a lot of misperceptions about what therapy actually is.
Yeah, no, I think you just touched on that of the coaching piece. I think I see a lot of that, and just using buzzwords, just using kind of terms and ideas that are taken from a therapeutic approach, but not really thought out and kind of put together of, I don't know. I don't mean to kind of minimize it, but, there's someone like yourself that has spent the time and the years of getting your degree and getting the license, that it takes a lot. And someone that goes for coaching of, just knowing of how impactful words can be, right? Knowing of you have the control. Someone's coming to you saying of like, I have a problem, or like, I want to work on something for myself, of having the years and the experience and the background, knowing of how, your words can really change their life. If they say something, do something wrong, that, that can be detrimental to them if it goes the wrong way. And I think that right. I think the internet culture speeds that thing up of like, I'm just looking for that answer. I'm looking for that, quick fix of, and maybe you've seen this too, as I've seen it throughout the years of, what do you think about this? What, how would you answer this question? Like, I'm not, as a therapist, I don't answer. I kind of give the question back, and learning those kind of tools and traits of how powerful that can be. And that's definitely something I worry about with the coaching aspect of it, and that kind of quick fix of what you see online. And what have you seen, or have you kind of heard in your world of more people kind of going to the quote unquote AI therapy of using ChatGPT? If I'm feeling anxious, depressed, I've been seeing this more and more in different email chains that I'm on, of that they're losing patients of just finding it online. I don't know what you've seen or experienced, what your thoughts are on the AI takeover of therapy now.
It's a good question. And just real quickly, to circle back to the coaching thing, and I'll come right back to the AI. I think more people in this space can be a good thing. And so I'm not against coaches. I do coaching myself. I just think that there's so many different folks entering this space, therapeutic or therapeutic adjacent, that it can be confusing. So I just wanted to add that point, that I think coaches are great. But when it comes to AI, I am just figuring it out like everyone else. I am not really sure. I think it can be an incredibly powerful adjunct to psychotherapy, whether it's, recording sessions and sort of churning out a recap of what happened in that session, or, as a therapist, you can use it to help treatment plan, to write notes as an administrative tool. What I'm gathering is that a lot of people are turning to chat bots as therapists, asking them the deep questions, revealing themselves, trying to figure out the hardest problems they have in their life. I think Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has said as much. So people are using it as a therapist, and you can get some really terrible advice from an AI. I'm sure it's going to get better and better, and it already has. And you get some really powerful advice as an AI, and that's someone who's tested it out myself. I think, though, fundamentally, we as humans yearn for and crave for the face-to-face, real-life human relationships, that we learn and we heal from heartbreak through authentic relationships, where there's another live, living, breathing nervous system across from us. There's something very powerful, probably evolutionarily adapted, to seek that and want that. And I think that I'm not so sure that, if I was in a relationship that was going really bad, and I was like, you know what, that's it. I'm going to talk to a chatbot about this. If I told my wife, you know what, I'm going to go to a chatbot. I'm going to figure out my drinking problem with that chatbot. I don't get the sense that she would feel a sense of confidence with that, even 5 years down the line. Or in the reverse, if my wife was like, I'm going to figure out, why I'm having all these difficulties, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT how to deal with it. That doesn't inspire confidence in me, because as you know, as a therapist, we change through authentic, real life relationships. That is a huge part of the change process. It's not just read a book or ask a bot and get fed back an answer and then apply it. It's like,
Right.
You see where I'm going? You see where I'm going?
Yeah, it's a bigger issue of, as someone was kind of telling me of, or first they sent me of a prompt from YouTube of like, to put in of like, I'm 42 years old, I have 2 kids, I've suffered from depression before, and blah blah blah. Like, this is how you should prompt ChatGPT to ask it of like, do I need medication? Geez, this is. But I think the bigger thing too that kind of came from that even was, well, the issue of paying for it, right? Of how many insurance companies, like we know a couple that have taken back doing virtual anymore. You can't even do that. You have to go in person. Or if you're private pay, how much that can be. And I think that's a hindrance too, which is unfortunate. And I think another piece too that was discussed was the headspace, like using the model where you can just pay the $20-something a session and you can text, which isn't a good form of therapy, but you can do these different things that are cheaper versions. And I think that's where it kind of gets scary, right? I think your point is absolutely correct of using it in accordance with or adjunct with other forms that you're seeking out, whether coaching or therapy or whatever. I think the bigger question is, right, how do we give people the ability to choose, right, without having the economic issue be the hindrance, or being able to get somewhere, right, to be able to do it online if they want to. I found that to be a huge positive of that was always supposed to be coming, and then all of a sudden it came over COVID, and so many people that I would see at night, and I'm like, right, I don't want to drive and be stuck in traffic, I'll just do it from home. That kind of opened up the doors to so many men specifically. I think I got a big influx of, I was able to go to work and able to come home and just be able to do a session before losing another hour being on traffic back and forth. So I think that's very powerful for sure.
And I think what AI does very well, I think it can diagnose. It's starting to diagnose quite well. Not that that's hugely necessary for therapy, but it can be, like, to help give you a sense of, oh, I didn't see that. You can sort of check your blind spots as a clinician. It's very good at capturing personality based on language too. And so it is really able to give powerful personality conceptualizations of a person based on what they've written. So that, I'm sure that will have import for mental health care.
So let's talk of ChatGPT. We have a few minutes left, and I do use it right now. It's just for that, but you can use it. I feel like I use it a lot for my business now. It's very resourceful and helpful. So I'm coming up for questions and trying to put in some information I was reading, understanding about you. It said, "Do you want rapid fire DADennial questions?" I'm like, sure. Give me some questions here. So let's run through it for ChatGPT's sake here. 10 seconds max. We're gonna go through them here.
Okay.
Favorite dad fail moment.
Favorite dad fail moment. Letting my daughter go on her scooter momentarily without a helmet on while she was holding the dog on a leash.
Oh, no.
And that resulted in skin knees and skin elbows and things. That's it.
Most overused piece of mental health advice.
It is what it is. Now, I think there is some wisdom in there, but it's just become a cliche that I do hear a lot of guys say.
First word that comes to mind when you hear dad burnout.
I get it. And I think it's a product of the modern age. You probably didn't hear dad burnout very frequently.
No.
25, 30, 40 years ago. And so, now it's time we have to start putting words on that.
Male postpartum depression was one personally that I had to learn about. Going through that, being home. One thing every dad should stop apologizing for.
Showing up with their kids and parenting out loud. at work. Or I don't say like just parenting out loud. Let's put it that way. Talking about their kids at work, like that is, you bring your kids into the room in a Zoom meeting for work. I think it shows you as a whole person.
Yeah.
So no apologies if you bring up kids in the office.
Oh yeah. Lastly, what is your parenting superpower?
I think my parenting superpower is bringing playfulness into the room when it's needed most, or maybe not when it's needed most, just having it as a go-to. I have 2 daughters, and I just love just being goofy with them. Do a lot of music and rough and tumble play, and just joking around and making fun of them making fun of me. And so I feel like that is a superpower.
Yeah.
Mine. Just to be an idiot.
You said you have 2 girls?
Yeah.
Okay, I got 2 boys, so rough and tumble. I'm like, well, that's a different meaning in my household with a 8 and 6-year-old. The drywall be damned pretty soon here.
Yeah, maybe mine's a lighter version of it.
Yeah. And lastly, off of that, me and Caesar came up with a while ago of, when you're just feeling of you need a snack, right? What you're snacking on is our little segment of like, what is your go-to, like whether it's hidden that no one sees or so your late night snack, like what is your kind of go-to of I just need something that makes me feel good?
Well, that's an easy question. That's the easiest of all of them. I'll give you 2 answers, even though you asked for one. One is dark chocolate. Past 9 p.m. That dark chocolate's gonna get eaten, and then there's popcorn too. So
just regular popcorn or kettle corn or... Okay. All right, Dr. Jett Stone, thank you very much for your time. Go get his book, Quiet Your Mind, A Men's Guide, a Science-Backed Real-World Playbook for Men Dealing with Stress. So thank you very much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. And
thank you,
check him out.
Thanks a lot.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Jett Stone again for coming on. I appreciate his wealth of knowledge and the men's health background. I also wanted to promote his book, Quiet Your Mind, A Men's Guide, a science-backed real-world playbook for men dealing with stress, overthinking, and emotional burnout. You can also find him in Psychology Today. He's written articles for the New York Times and CNN. He leads workshops for leaders and high performers through the consulting work he does at Workhaven. So please go to his websites there and check out Dr. Jett Stone. Please go to our website, DADennial.com. Please put your email into the newsletter. It'll be coming out monthly. Go to the YouTube channel there. Please watch other clips that we put up there. Like and subscribe. Leave comments of other guests that you'd like to see and things that you like and maybe things that you don't.